Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. Today we are going to decimate this Minwu Shinryu fight. So this is from the story chapter. Now, to be honest, this fight isn't that hard to begin with. So it's pretty easy to decimate, but you know the way I like to play the game. I'm not like a crazy challenge runner, I'm not a theory crafter. I like to go in and just stomp content. So if you also like stomping content, you probably will like my channel. I always take the path of least resistance. I want the team that's just going to crush it, get through it as easy as possible. So in this instance, and I did specifically, like, I very easily could have done like a Renoa, Tifa team comp here, something like that. But I did want to showcase Minwu here a little bit. So I am commentating over a pre-recorded video. But this was pretty, a pretty safe, easy fight here, right? And so with Minwu, Minwu's FR, and I did want to feature Minwu's FR. Now you could do this with Core's FR just fine. But Minwu is designed in a way where I think you can run Minwu in a more offensive way where you can delete their turns and just take a bunch of turns. Or you can do the more defensive route, which I do think Minwu is more effective defensive in the defensive route. So basically Minwu's FR is going to reward you for doing holy damage or for doing off-turn damage, right? So in this defensive team comp, Gladio counters count, all of the core follow-ups and counters count, and then obviously Minwu's traps count. So basically the way you want to play Minwu, I would say you're safe to delete turns if you want to a little bit before the force time, but coming into the force time you want to make sure that the enemies have turns coming up and that you don't delete turns, right? Now you definitely can play Minwu in a more offensive fashion, and we are doing selfie here, getting some extra launch damage, why not? I did have to find a good selfie here. I've been struggling getting these GIMP selfies, you know, and I just got into the habit. I just got to check them every time I go in, even though I think people should be getting it by now. Like, you need your Force Enhanced 30 selfies, right? So if you want to play Minwu in the more offensive fashion where you do want to delete turns, then you run a different type of off turn. Now I think Core could still work because Core's still going to trigger when you're attacking, but I would say doing units like Cisne, Kane, Freya, those types of units, Yang, those are the types of units you want to run on the more offensive build, because they are just going to be following up like crazy just anytime you attack, right? Which is why they paired Cisne on the banner. It makes a lot of sense, right? So if you do a team comp like that, then you can go ahead and delete turns, just let your team take all the turns, do all your free, you know, extra attacks and everything. The only problem is I do think that, like, if you want to get the FR gauge higher, the defense comp will always out damage it, because as long as the enemies are willing to attack and take turns, you can just have so many free turns of stacking the gauge that isn't eating up your turn count, right? Whereas if you're doing the offensive, every button you press is going to subtract one from the force time no matter what. So it's a very stagnant number that you're going to get to, right? It's going to be attack, you know, depending on what attack you do, maybe trigger Minwu trap, and then it's going to be Kane follow-up, Cisne follow-up, attack, Kane Cisne follow-up, you know, Kane Cisne follow-up. It's going to be very stagnant, right? Whereas if you do the team comp I'm doing here, there's really no limit to how high you can get. It's just a matter of how often will the enemies attack. You know, I was listening to the TCC podcast this week, and Mark brought up a really good point. I think Minwu would have been way cooler if you teleported your own team away and took away your own turns. I think that would have actually been legit, to just wipe your turns and give the enemies just a ton of turns. That would have been so fun. You would be able to get the gauge so high with something like that. For something that you typically would think would be a very negative effect to, like, delete your own turns. But in today's game, if you're running these defense comps, you don't want to take turns. You just want the enemies to go and go crazy, right? So I thought that would have been a really cool idea that Mark had. It'd be nice if they did that. Obviously, they're not going to do that now. The character's already built, but I think for future reference, that could be an idea, right? Like, for example, like, what if, just thinking of a character theme-wise that would work with that, what if Edward's hide actually deleted his own turn, for example, right? Or deleted the enemy's turns? That would make sense, right? Because he runs away and he hides for a little bit, which I thought would be kind of cool, right? Alright, well, and I apologize, I didn't, you know, I recorded this kind of late at night. I'm like, nobody will probably message or anything, and sure, my Discord starts blowing up a little bit, or I get YouTube notifications, so there's a few little pop-ups that are going to pop up here and there, but shouldn't be too bad. So all we're really doing in this fight is we're just kind of going through the motions till we get to our force time, which we're about to hit. So I believe on this turn here is where we're going to pop Minwu's force. And the nice thing with these defense comps, you don't have to worry about taking 500 turns in a row or trying to set up, you know, whatever. You just pop the force and let your counter tanks do their thing, right? So in my Minwu, by the way, basically has everything except the BT. Now, so what you're going to see here is we have a pretty crazy good force time here. But keep in mind that with the BT, we would be doing double traps. Like, so we'd have twice as many traps going on. And when the traps go off, that does his overhead counter, which when his overhead gets to 5, then he does a big follow-up attack, very similar to like how Garnet works, right? So the BT, it not only gives you double traps, but then you're triggering that extra off-turn attack more often because you're ticking up your overhead buff a lot faster, right? So with what you guys see here in this video with the FR, just keep in mind that if I had the BT going here, he would be doing even more. Now, I do really want Minwu's BT, so here's my plan. I am planning to summon for Vaughn and Hope FR, and I'll probably just go in with tickets on those, but maybe I'll get really lucky and snipe a BT. But if not, what I might do, because my original plan was to ticket Celis FR and then token her BT, what that might encourage me to do is maybe just go really hard on Celis and like gem to pity her BT, and then I could still token Minwu's BT even if his BT isn't on a banner anymore. It'll always be available with tokens, right? So one way or the other, I think I want to come out of this with Minwu's BT because he is a pretty fun character and he is very good. But Celis really is my main prize this month, so I got to make sure I prioritize her first. And so I'm going to hold my BT tokens because I have to ensure it. I really wouldn't... If I can avoid going in with gems on Celis, I would like to. Just because my gem count's been kind of low for a hot minute, right? And I really want to build it up. And every time I go in with gems, I have to go darn near to pity. And it's just like, if I lost 125k gems right now, I literally would be down to like 125. I pretty much, that's what I got right now. It's about 2 pities worth in my resources. So I really don't want to be in that position. Especially with potentially some very hyped things coming for maybe Christmas. We know February isn't too far off after that, and then whatever the anniversary character is, probably some type of global first or time travel FR or something, will probably be coming for the anniversary, right? I think at the bare minimum to expect for anniversary is a time travel FR, at the like an early rework FR character. At a bare minimum, you can expect that, but I would not be surprised to see a global first character. Would not be surprised at all, right? But you can just see how hyped last year anniversary was, and it was just a time travel Garnet, and it was like one of the more hype releases the game has ever had, partially because they made her busted as all heck, but that's all it takes. It doesn't have to be a brand new character, right? Okay, so we're up to 300% already, and we still have 7 turns of force, so you can see this is pretty standard for this defense team comp. It's just attack and then let the enemies take their turns, and you can see the enemies are getting pretty aggressive. We got 4 enemy turns coming relatively quickly here. And every time we off-turn, we're bumping up by like 10 to 15%. And that gauge adds up. We actually got a 20 there on the holy attack. And then there's a follow-up for 10. Like all these little follow-ups, right? And here's the thing. They're popping these all attacks. And we did the... oh, what do you call it? We did the exploit. We did the core exploit where we actually have Oath of Absolute Defense on my whole party, basically. So every time they all attack, we're doing 3 counters. So that really helps push the gauge because we're getting an extra 10% that we normally wouldn't be getting without that exploit, right? So, and then Gladio countering up. So just keep in mind that with all of this going on, Minwu's traps would normally be triggering twice with the BT effect, right? And then there's that Sublime Soul, and that Sublime Soul would be triggering more often, right? It just all would be triggering so much more. So here I have to check my debuffs because I'm looking at my Oath of Absolute Defense, and I do see that my Oath is getting pretty low. So I'm ready to actually refresh that now. Because if I didn't refresh it, it would actually start to run out on a character before I could refresh it again. So that's what I'm looking at. Well, so that's Gladio right there. But then Core comes up, I was checking, and I think on Core's turn here, I definitely want to refresh it. Because you can see the enemies are doing like a bunch of attacks. And I don't want a character sitting there without the Oath of Absolute Defense on. And you can see they're targeting Minwu. So I got to make sure Minwu's got that going. Because Minwu's going to burn through it on the next turn here. So I do believe with core, I reapply Oath of Absolute Defense on Minwu, because we need it on Minwu for those 4 enemy attacks coming up. Otherwise, we would be we'd be wasting all the core follow-ups, which we don't want to do, right? All right, so we have a Reaper's Gale, and I do think I opt to pop that here just because 500% Reaper's Gale is going to do some pretty good damage here, right? I know it gives core an extra turn, which is a little counterproductive, but, you know, we're still doing holy damage. We still got 13% there, which isn't bad for this type of FR, right? This isn't the type of FR where you're like, oh my god, 80% on one attack. It's more like you do a lot of small chip damage type force increases, right? It's just all these little 10 to 15%ers, they add up and it gets the gauge up there, right? So that's what makes this force pretty good. It's just one of those, once again, it's in line with core, it's in line with Reno. Reno's definitely fallen off though. Like these new age ones are way better than Reno's FR now. Core and Minwu have really like the top tier defensive type builds for these force teams, right? For these defensive forces. So yeah, now look at this is what I was just like. I was like drooling at this point. Look at that, 4 enemy turns. This is why it would be so awesome if we could delete our own turns and just give the enemies like 10 turns in a row, like something ridiculous. You know, and you got Gladio in there who basically will just protect you from everything. But this is pretty good, right? Like we're gonna get to, I think we get to like 700+% here, something in that range. And this is without the BT. And with the BT, we would have pushed it even higher, right? Like, I think it's safe to say we probably would have been pushing 1000% had we had the BT on here. Just with all those extra trap procs we would have had, it would have been insane. So this is why I really want to get Minwu's BT, hopefully very cheaply. So I kind of want to showcase Minwu again. And let's see what kind of damage we can get on this. Maybe just do the same fight. Because, you know, this could end up being... The thing is this would be a very ideal, like, showcase fight. The problem is it has elemental lockout in it. So I can't just showcase any character here. So that's the unfortunate part. I believe in here you can only do holy or non-elemental. So, you know, any non-elemental characters, though, I think I could safely showcase in here. But any character that has an element that's not holy, I won't be able to showcase in here. So, I mean, that first original stage I do is fine. But yeah, here we are. Busting up over 700%. And you know what we do when we're at like 700-800%? We pop that brother summon. Yes, we do. We pop that brother summon. And we're usually doing darn near a 10 mil AoE attack with this brother summon, which is absolutely busted. So yeah, 738. Pretty good to get the 738 without the BT. That's pretty darn good, I must say. I think it's safe to say we would have been 800-900% at least if we had the BT here. But that just did a huge chunk of damage. And then sure, let's grab a Reaper's Gale. Now we are starting to hit ones. And that's because we have Earth Element on, which is locked out. But Reaper's Gale, we had the rainbow numbers. So that worked out pretty well that we had rainbow numbers for that final hit. Still did a huge chunk of damage. We got them down to, you know, 3 and 5%. Ignore the pop-ups, by the way. Things got a little crazy there at the end. But even, like, doing ones here, like, not a big deal. And we do end up finishing these guys off fairly easily here. I do think they end up getting to their force time, though, which is unfortunate. Because they do have... It's been a very common force theme lately, where, like, if they're in force time, you just do 0 HP damage. So we do kind of have to let them go through their force time. So this does end up dragging on a little bit longer than I would have liked. But obviously with Minwu BT, they for sure would have been out of there in that one force time. One, because we would have pushed the gauge up more. And two, there would have physically been more attacks going on. We very easily would have covered up that last 5% HP, I think, having the BT effect up, right? So yeah, that's basically it. But overall, really not that hard of a fight. And I know Mark and Mino were kind of complaining about the fight a little bit. Because there isn't a lot of mechanics to it. It's pretty easy, whatever. It is kind of like a garbage time fight. I'm okay with fights like this once in a while. Like, I'm not a big, like, oh, they all have to be super mechanical and super challenging. Like, I'm someone that doesn't mind some easy content, but it can't just be all easy content, right? I do think like something like Dare to Defy would have paired really well with this cycle, because I think there are quite a few of these easier fights, and having something like Dare to Defy would have just been really nice, because part of what can make a fight like this more difficult is having less characters to choose from, right? And having less options, and maybe going in with some weaker teams. Now, yes, obviously the Dare to Defy haters will always say, create your own challenge, you can go in yourself, right? But I'm someone that I would rather, like, if it's in the game and it's built for it and I get rewards, I'm having more fun with it and I like doing it. You know, and I don't have a ton of time on my hands, so I'm probably not going to sit and try to make up my own challenge here. I like the in-game challenge, and I like getting the extra free rewards. So you can see here, we are still popping a little bit of damage, but there are a bunch of zeros coming up from their force. You can see that the zeros are coming. So at this point, you know, they're going to take a bunch of turns in a row here, so I'm just going to let them kind of go through the motions here. And then basically, the moment they hop out of force, they pop, because we got them down to 1% and 2% here, right? So you guys can let me know if you tried any creative team builds. I know, I'm pretty sure I've seen a lot of solos here. I'm pretty sure Minwu can solo this, like, no problem. Who knows? You probably could even solo with, like, Gladio, maybe. I just don't know if he has the damage. I mean, he's going to sit there, like, forever and just take a bunch of attacks. So it would be, with Gladio, it would be a matter of turn count. I don't know if he can do it on his own without, like, FR damage, but maybe. But I know Minwu for sure can solo this. I've seen solos of it. I've never been one to be like, oh, I'm going to do these solo challenge runs. I would rather just use more of my characters and stomp the content, right? Like I said, that's the type of player I am. I want to make the fight as easy as possible as I can for myself. And that's the other thing with Dare to Defy It, is it pushes me to, like, use other team builds, right? Which I like. And I did like Crevasse. I thought that was fun as well. I kind of like other lockout events just a little bit more than Crevasse, just because I don't like to think so much with, like, setting up all of the codes. I like Abyss better, where they just tell me the codes and I have to try to use my box to kind of fit into those codes. I kind of like that a little bit better. And Equinox, I think, was my favorite. And I think a lot of people really liked Equinox, so I'd like to see Equinox back. That for sure was, like, my favorite global first event that they had. That was awesome. But between Equinox, Abyss, Crevasse, I'll take any of them. Dare to Defy, like, any of it. Like, just give me any of this lockout content. I love lockout content. So hopefully we'll see more in the future. I was actually really disappointed that they didn't announce any, like, lockout content for November. That's why, here's the thing. I'm always an optimist, and I'm always willing to see the good in things. So the good thing about this month maybe having easier fights and not having extra lockout content, it's a great time to save. Like, if you want to save resources, you can safely skip every banner this cycle, right? Like, when I did my BT guide and I was talking about, like, and I do my Should You Pull videos, really it was like Celis, Minwu, and then maybe Vaughn are probably like the highest tier units here. And they're all very skippable. Like, there's all units that do things better than them. It's not like here's where Noah and Tifa, like, levels of units, right? So I don't know, guys. You can let me know what you think of all this stuff. Let me know how your run's going here. There's mine. Pretty easy peasy run, pretty mindless. So anyways, thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.